What's really happening in Murray City School District? In January 2021, there was a book, Call Me Max by Kyle Lukoff, read in a third grade classroom in Murray City School District.
There was an article that was published in the Salt Lake Tribune on February 11th about this book. It was also published in ABC4 News, Fox 13, The Associated Press, Daily Wire, Breitbart, Newsweek, and The Blaze. And then it was also referenced in two other articles in MSN and the Today articles about another school district in Texas who had the same book read. And Murray School District was referenced in these articles because they had the same book come up.
And then later there was a letter to the editor sent into the Salt Lake Tribune regarding this issue as well.
In 2021, Murray parents were tried in the court of public opinion through the Salt Lake Tribune and Murray School Board meetings. Parents were judged to be masking homophobia, transphobia, and racism as a concern for parental rights. We are now setting the record straight. My name is Laurel Fetzer, and I am a parent. I've had 4 children who've attended Murray School District schools. I've been a volunteer in every school my kids have attended. I've most recently been the district science fair coordinator for the University of Utah Science Fair in Murray School District. I've been the president of the Spartan Strong, formerly Renaissance program. I've been on the sex ed committee for about 4 years, and I've been the PTA president 7 different times in elementary and the high school. And I'm currently running for the state school board in District 5 because I'm concerned about the policies that are coming through our state that aren't focusing on education, and I would like to see that return to Utah.
Mm-hmm. And I am April Wild DeSpain. I grew up in Murray, and my husband and I attended Murray schools, kindergarten through 12th grade. We moved back to Murray so that our children could attend Murray schools because we loved the schools and we had such good experiences in them growing up. We have 6 children, 3 of whom are of school age. And my son was in the class where Call Me Max was read in 3rd grade Horizon Elementary School. So after this happened, I learned more about the agendas going on in our schools, and we actually removed our kids from Murray School District, and now we are currently homeschooling. And that was a big loss for us because that's why we moved back to Murray, and I had loved the schools in Murray. But because of everything that's happened, I am now running for Murray School Board District 3 because I want to stand up for children and make sure that when they go to school, they're being educated in the things that really matter, which is, to me, academics. That's what school is for. And so we are going to present what's really happening in Murray City School District and what we really experienced in 2021. And as we talked about before, there were things, parents were judged to be a certain way, and we now want to set that record straight. And we have a ton of evidence that we're going to present to you that will definitely set that record straight. And so we're going to have to try to go through it as quickly as we can because we have a lot.
And we're going to post the PDF of these slides so anyone can reference them after, because we're not going to spend a lot of time on every slide just because there's so much information.
Right. And if you want to access the PDF, you can go to www.votelaurel.org, which is VOTELAUREL.org, or www.aprilformurray.com, APRIL4FORMURRAY.com. And those, you can see all these slides for yourself. So first, to start out, we want to say we support diversity and inclusion in schools according to the traditional definitions of those words. That's number 1. Point 2, we believe schools should be focused on academic education, not on equity or social emotional learning. Number 3, whether or not Call Me Max was brought in by a student, it was and is part of a bigger agenda related to equity. And number 4, equity is about teaching our children to be anti-racist, which does not mean simply not being racist, and to embrace LGBTQ plus ideologies through intersectionality. So here's where the story starts. On September 3rd, 2020, parents were sent a picture of these book boxes, and Dr. Job, who was the vice principal at Horizon Elementary, sent us this email on Parent Square, which is an app that sends messages to parents. And not all the parents have the app, but the ones who have Parent Square, they can see it on the app, or they can get the emails in their email. So she sent this email and she talked about book boxes and that children were going to be having anti-racist education. And basically that was it. There was no book list sent out to parents, but just a picture of some of the books. And then we are going to show this on the timeline. This was September 3rd, 2020. This is where the story kind of begins, but we're putting a timeline in here because there is so much information and we're going back and forth as we learned information. So hopefully this timeline will help listeners.
Help tell the story and help you see where we're like, whoa, we didn't know all this was happening.
Yeah, and
before this book was read,
and help listeners to keep the story straight in the timeline.
That's good.
Okay,
and we just wanted to explain. April's son was in the Horizon Spanish dual language immersion program, and in each grade, each class has 2 classes. One is an English class and one is a Spanish class. So one classroom starts in the morning in Spanish, and then the other one starts in English, and then at lunchtime they trade. The Spanish class then switches to the English, and the English class switches to the Spanish class. Both English and Spanish classes are taught the same content. However, because there are sometimes where certain classes could be interrupted by different things, sometimes a class can get ahead or be behind the other class, and they make it up the next day or within a couple days. So We just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, we wanted to make that clear because it's going to come up in the story as to how some classes had read the book and another class was going to read the book, but then didn't read it. And so hopefully this gives some background on that. So this story begins on January 6, 2021 with Julian is a Mermaid. This was read to the class. This is a story about a boy who sees some mermaids on the subway or on a train, and he wants to he wants to dress up like them. So he's imagining turning into a mermaid, and his clothes come off, and his hair grows long, and he grows a mermaid tail in his imagination. His grandma realizes that he likes to dress up as a mermaid, so she helps him with this, and then she takes him to a parade where people are dressed up. After they read this book, the students did this assignment that said, when I look at at the bottom it says, Julian sees himself as a mermaid in the story. Draw yourself in the mirror as whatever you would like to become. This was the assignment that my son filled out, and he drew himself as a video gamer because he loves to play video games. So he brought home this assignment after that. So here we have January 6, 2021, Julian is a Mermaid is read in class. On Friday, January 8th, Call Me Max was read. This is about a girl who looks in the mirror and sees a boy. And you might notice the assignment that they did with Julian talks about when you look in the mirror, what do you see? And then Call Me Max starts out with a girl looking in the mirror and seeing a boy. She explains that she's a transgender boy and that what transgender means, what gender means, which according to this book means being a boy or a girl or a little of both or not feeling like a boy or a girl. Here it says that the parents who called them a boy or a girl when they were born made a mistake. And she explains to her friend, I don't feel like I'm a girl because I don't feel like it on the inside. And she says, I still know I'm a boy. And her friend says, how do you know? Because I feel like one on the inside. So this book is about feelings, and that's what determines your gender. After reading the book, the teacher read the About the Author section, and Kyle Lukoff, who's the author, is a transgender male like Max. And as you can see, this person has a beard. So the students asked if she was a girl, how did she now grow a beard? And the teacher explained that when you grow up, you can take medicine to grow a beard or not grow a beard if you want to change your gender. So at this point, parents begin talking. I got a text from my neighbor who asked me had my son heard about this book? And she said in the red, her child had told her all about the two books in detail, and also how the teacher told the students if they're a girl but really feel like a boy, they can take medicine to grow a beard. If they're a boy and feel like inside they're really a girl, they can take medicine to not grow a beard. So here we have Call Me Max, January 8th. At this point, parents began to email teachers and administrators, January 10th. This is from Sarah Paul, who was the third grade teacher that read it, to Vanessa Job, the vice principal, and Whitney Anderson, the principal at Horizon Elementary. She said she's forwarding this email to them from a parent, and she says, should I have gotten permission before reading this? I'm sorry that if this causes any headaches for you, but I'm also not sorry I read the book. And she explains that a student in her homeroom is discovering the path of being trans and brought in the book. Here's another email from a parent, and this was the email that I wrote. This was another email from another parent who's concerned, and here's the teacher and administrator replies on Monday, January 11th. Sarah Paul, the third grade teacher, said, as a school and district, we are focusing on equity and anti-racist work. Reading books about all people is part of this. Learning about transgender, gay, and straight people in developmentally appropriate ways is part of our school and district. She sent links to the books, and she said they were developmentally appropriate. She felt that students benefited from the books, and she said she followed state administrative code and the district's memo on equity, which she attached to the email. On the left is the state code that she cited, and on the right is the district memo, which she cited as her pass for reading these books without parental permission. And Vanessa Job, the vice principal, replied to me. She said the lessons are wonderful and developmentally appropriate, and she included a schedule of equity work and said it was done in conjunction with Second Step. She sent me this list for monthly.
That's a class schedule.
Right, a class schedule monthly. And then here she said, here's a comprehensive list of the books that third grade reads during their Second Step lessons. So Julian is a Mermaid, Call Me Max, and Enemy Pie. So here's where we want to talk about this dual immersion program. My son's class had not yet read Call Me Max. His class had read Julian is a Mermaid, but not Call Me Max. And so she's telling me, yes, your son's class is going to read this book next week. At least that's how I understood it when she sent me this list. And Enemy Pie was another one on this list that she sent me, which is a fine book.
Which is a great book.
But it was different from other lists.
You'll see when the lists come that's not included on her list. So that's why it's important, because we're like, wait, why are they so different? Mm-hmm. Right?
So this was Dr. Job's email to another parent on that same day. She tells this parent, I Am Max, she meant Call Me Max, was not read in your child's class. That book was brought and discussed in the other class. The book was read in order to help a student feel supported. So she sent that to this parent. That seems, a contradiction to what I was told, because I was told Call Me Max would be read in my son's class. And this parent's child was in the exact same class. So this was really confusing. So here is another response to that same parent the next day. She said, the Max book was specifically needed for an incident in the other class. Max was not needed in your son's class. Those books in particular, Julian is a Mermaid and Max, are not listed because they are not in the original equity book bundles. I will add those books to the list as well under additional resources. And then she said, you will see a pacing guide with the months to see which equity topics will be taught at which time. So this was the list she sent to that parent. And those are the books listed in third grade. And as you can see, Enemy Pie, Julian is a Mermaid, and Call Me Max are nowhere on the third grade list sent to this other parent. And so this is the point where we start getting confused.
You're like, why did I get one email and she got the other and they're the same class?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really confusing.
Right. So here's the same list she sent to.
And this is the schedule where this is our monthly themes for classroom focus, right?
for classroom equity topics. And then here's close up of the list. So there's about 4 or 5 or 6 books for each grade. And we'll just click through so you can look through these. And if you want to pause, feel free. We're just going to click through quickly. Oh, and then we wanted to explain that she says the lessons are embedded in the Second Step program. So equity and Second Step are one. Second Step is the social emotional learning program for our elementary school. And so she had included these she meant for these to be embedded together as one.
And she said that specifically.
Right. So here's, in red, we're putting things that are concerning to us. So all the points that are red are where we get confused or where we're having a misunderstanding.
Okay.
So on Wednesday, January 13th, I responded to Dr. Job. And at this point, I was very confused, having talked to other parents who were receiving contradicting lists. And I also want to make note that I had heard that there was a teacher in the school who had reached out and said, if parents don't push back, they're just going to get shut down. And so I made up my mind, I am going to push back because I will not be shut down when it comes to my kids. And this is a problem, to be getting contradicting information when it comes to my children.
Yeah, there should be transparency. You should know what's going on in their class.
Right. So I wrote this in the wee hours of the morning on Wednesday, January 13th. And this is a long email basically saying, why are things mixed up here? What's really going on? And I'm not going to read it all because it's long, but I was making sure that my voice was going to be heard. And I want to definitely point this out here. I said, I was informed that this book, Call Me Max, was read to third grade because there was apparently a student in third grade dealing with those issues. How was it deemed necessary that this book be read to the class? Clearly, I do not need to know, nor do I want to know the details on this third grade student in particular. So I made it clear, if this is read in reference to a student, I do not need to know the identity of this student, but I want to know what is going on. What's the protocol behind this decision?
Well, and one of the things that you've said is that I want to know how they made the decision. So if they're going to make it for my student, my child, I know what that process is going to be so I can predict.
Mm-hmm. So I can be informed for my own children.
Right.
And then I cited a law saying that I expect this to be corrected because here's the law. So here is Dr. Job's initial reaction and her draft responses she did not send to me. Her initial drafted response was, I will include the books about supporting transgender students on our list. Those were not included at first because we did not think they were necessary. As we learned more about our students' population, we learned they are necessary. And then further down, she says, yes, we made an informed decision about the 2 books as an admin and teacher team. This was Darren Dean telling her, don't email her, just talk to her in person. And Vanessa saying, well, I don't.
Well, Darren Dean,
yeah, he is the Director of Personnel and Student Services.
For the Murray City School District.
Yes, and right. So she's getting some feedback from him. And then here's the email she sent to Sarah Paul, the third grade teacher. She said, no worries, Sarah, you supported your transgender students. If they do not like that, they are welcome to leave Horizon. We do not shift equity practices. We support all students. So she's talking about me and my son. Apparently, we can leave Horizon if we don't like it.
And they support everyone except your student.
Right. That's confusing. We support all students, but they can leave if they don't like it. So at this point, Whitney Anderson and Darren Dean called me. And Whitney Anderson is the principal of Horizon Elementary. And like we said, Darren Dean is the Director of Personnel and Student Services. So we'll play. It's not the full phone. We do have the phone call recorded, the full phone call, but we're just going to play a little snippet.
I think in the future what we can do better is with the communication and the transparency piece that you mentioned for sure. So my thoughts on that, I would like to get our equity books the list that we sent out at the beginning of the year, I would like to get those on our website and make those available so that people don't have to search back through Parent Square, having those on there. And then any children's books that address equity that we feel like need to be added to that list, that then those teachers can bring those books to our school equity team that's made up of an admin team and some teachers in the building, and then have them look over those and discuss their appropriateness or not. And then if it passes through that committee, I would like to then take the book to our school community council. Where the parents come into it is after the book passes the equity committee made up of teachers, it would then go to our school community council, which is our parent committee.
Okay, so that was her way of helping to resolve this issue. And she said, we're going to have the books go through this council and we're going to post them on the website. And she also mentioned that the list had been sent out at the beginning of the year, which that wasn't true. The list had not been sent out. And we'll see that further on. But we did find out that they had commented on a Parent Square post. And Dr. Job had put the list in one of the comments, which to me, that's not sending it out to parents. That's replying to a couple parents on a post. So at this point, the equity book bundles were paused. Later on in that phone call, Whitney and Darren agreed to pause the equity book bundles to make sure that all the books were in line with Utah laws. And she made no claim that a student brought in Call Me Max, although it would have been a perfect opportunity to say that, especially since my email had referenced that I didn't need to know anything about the student. So 10 days later, so on January 13th, the book bundles were paused due to parental concern about sexuality being discussed with third graders. 10 days later, there was a Pride conference that we learned about from an article online. And so I signed up with my friend who's a teacher, and we attended that through we attended that virtually. This was called Pride Not Prejudice, an LGBTQ plus conference for Utah educators, students, and caregivers. It started on the Friday, January 22nd. There was an opening message. And then on Saturday, January 23rd, the majority of the presentations were given, and you could just sign up for a few of them and watch them. And that's what we did. And we made sure to watch the Murray Equity Council, which presented. And they presented this from the ground up, Uniting Educators for Change. And Kara Cerise, who is also a member of FAM, presented as part of the Equity Council because she was the co-chair of the Murray Equity Council. And this was the first time we had heard about this Equity Council. And Laurel had been majorly involved in the district for 20 plus years. So it was surprising that she had not known about this council going on. And also, it was surprising that we happened to find this presentation through an article in the newspaper online. It wasn't announced through the school district or through Parent Square. Nobody knew about it, but we just happened to stumble across it. And so we signed up for it. So here we have Kara Cerise presenting. We have Morgan Lammy. This is the
Core beliefs.
the leadership team presenting their core beliefs. And Darren Dean, who is also on the leadership team, presenting the representation. Vanessa Job, who is co-chair of the Equity Council, presents the successes. And then they talk about their goals and projects. And here's a little video of them.
My journey as an activist and an advocate for change started long before I ever became a teacher, but I will say that being an educator has fueled my passion and enthusiasm for social justice even more.
And then I'm going to jump down and just talk about the equity book bundles there. So those book bundles, the books that are pictured there, were all also approved by the school board. And what those are at Horizon Elementary is book bundles that center equity work and our students that have been marginalized as read-alouds. So that's been really nice for students and teachers to have as a weekly practice in their classroom. And they're currently on hold because you'll notice not every group is mentioned, in that equity book bundle. And I think that it's important with our equity work to ensure that we have all cultures represented and that we also have a system. So when there's a new book added to the equity work, that can go through we have a school equity team and then our school community council, and then have those books published and out on our website too, so that parents can have access to the books as well. So that's kind of the system moving forward. And it's just to ensure that we have correct communication about the books and that we also include more than we have now on those book bundles. So that was nice too, to have the school board work with us and ensuring that they're also in agreement with the books that are pictured. As something else that was really positive too, that the district came out with support of the equity team and then also of the school board, was a correction to a memo. And so we now have a memo that we can put out, but it affirms more inclusive practices and matches what we do and just our values as a school district. So that part's really nice. And I think the last part that, so far for our successes is also more professional development on cultural competency and on our LGBTQ plus community. We had Amanda Darrow, was part of one of the study sessions for us with the school board. And that was really great too, because she offered the trainings for the Pride Center for all of our faculty members as well. And something else that I'd like to mention about the equity book bundles too is what's been really successful as a school is having some adult-led professional development about the different equity pieces that we're talking about, so that we as teachers and adults understand gender identity and how to be supportive of gender identity in the classroom, and then how we understand race and then how to be supportive of race within our classroom. So it's really nice to have those professional development pieces so we can ensure that our students are getting access and feeling seen in our classrooms. And I think that that's just the biggest part of equity work in general, and what we would really like to see moving forward.
Okay, so in that video, Dr. Job mentions that the equity book bundles were on hold, and she says it's because they would like to get more representation in those books. She doesn't speak at all about parents pushing back or there being an issue with transparency. And then she goes on to speak about the process that they're going to get in place for putting them on the website and having these books go through the community council and stuff. And she mentions the professional development that they've done, and she also talks about the correction of the harmful memo. And so these are all successes of the equity council, right?
Right.
The other thing that we wanted to note from that Pride conference was that Kara says her journey as an activist, and that she talks about being an activist in the classroom. And that's one of the things that we are
Surprised about?
Yeah, we think that teachers should teach, not be doing activism in the classroom. And then when Vanessa Job talked about the memo on equity, she said our values as a school district is more representative of our values as a school district, which is interesting to note that, because the only people who really had influence on that memo, we found out later, were the equity council. So if it's really representing the values of this whole school district, then the whole school district should really have input on that. And they really didn't. But we'll get into that later. So also during the Pride Not Prejudice conference, there were several other presentations that we watched, and this was called Captivating Reads, presented by Nathan Spofford from King's English Bookstore, and it was moderated by Kara Cerise from FAM, who is also third grade teacher in Murray School District, and we'll just watch some of that. These were a few of his slides, and he showed Julian as a Mermaid, When Aiden Became a Brother, which was also by Kyle Lukoff, who wrote Call Me Max. He talked about the list of things that will not change, A Family is a Family is a Family, Rainbow Revolutionaries, Pride, The Day You Begin, and all of these books were found on the Equity Book Bundle list, except Julian is a Mermaid and then When Aiden Became a Brother. Those were not found on the original list, but we'll talk about if they were found on additional resources at a later time. So here's that video.
The brain, it seems, does not make much distinction between reading about an experience and encountering it in real life. In each case, the same neurological regions are stimulated, which means that we can give kids vicarious experiences. You can understand what it is, perhaps, to be gay or to be trans or to be on the other side of that without having been there. And how do we do that? We do it through books. And books share that experience, a vicarious experience into the brain. Julian is about a boy who is perhaps trans, we don't know, but he does like to dress up like the drag queens. And wow, here's another story. This is one of the ones that started it all in the world of gay children's books. This is Antango Makes Three, based upon a true story. This is about a girl who wants to do the hula and wants to be the part that men have traditionally had. And this is the story of how she changes things. See Jacqueline Woodson. Okay, here's Jacqueline Woodson. It's so important to me that kids get to see all of these people who are living full and beautiful lives, and also happen to include their sexuality inside of that. When Aiden Became a Brother, and this is about a transgender child. Harvey Milk was at the forefront of the gay pride movements. Again, this is A Family is a Family is a Family. About interesting gay people in the past. This is 50 LGBTQ plus people. This is a fun book by Rebecca Steed. She has written 2 Newbery novels. This is a list of things that will not change, but it is a magnificent photographic story of what it's like to be transgender. How does that work? How does that feel?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I can say that for myself as an elementary educator and an LGBTQ identified teacher, it's so exciting to see such a range of books.
Okay, so we just wanted to show him presenting some books because we find out later that Nathan Spofford from King's English Bookstore is the man who put together the Equity Book Bundle list. So we felt like it was relevant to show. Okay, and then this was a presentation by Amanda Darrow. This was the opening message. And this was something that I was really concerned about when I watched this. We found out later, is also part of FAM with Kara Cerise. And she's also part of the Utah Pride Center. And she presented these Getting to Know You orientation forms for teachers to give to students on the first day of school. And it talks about, here's a better picture, hopefully. Talks about what name do you want to be called in class and what pronouns would you like to be called in class. And then it says, can I use these names and this name or pronouns in front of your caregivers? And if not, which name should I use instead? This was very alarming to me as a parent because I don't want to send my children to a place where people are going to keep secrets from me as their parent. And she called this code switching. And she said, we do this all the time at the Utah Pride Center, and it's something that takes practice to get good at. Another presentation was the keynote speaker, Kyle Myers. She is an activist for gender theory. And here she says, by day, I help people disrupt the intergenerational transmission of sexism. This is taken from her website. And these were some slides that we found.
That you watched?
Yeah.
As part of the presentation.
Yeah, and she said, stereotypes and bias are learned and inherited through socialization, and they can be unlearned and intergenerationally disrupted. And this is the thing that we really find concerning, that they want to intergenerationally disrupt, meaning get between the parents and the children and disrupt those values being taught.
And the gender identities.
Mm-hmm. And here she talks again on point 2. She says that they actively work toward eliminating sexism and gender-based oppression and violence through unlearning binary gender stereotypes and consciously disrupting intergenerational transmission of gender discrimination. So to me, in other words, she's saying, you teaching your values that a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl, that's sexism. That is oppression and violence. And we are going to consciously disrupt that when you teach your children that. That's discrimination. And then we had Ali Martin, who also was a member of FAM. We later came to find out. She presented Leading Inclusive Schools, Policies, Practices, and Facing Resistance. And here's her bio from FAM. And this is just her presenting. And what was interesting about this was that she showed the same memo that I had received from Sarah Paul after Call Me Max was read. And she specifically said that she told teachers this was their get out of jail free card to show parents if they push back when LGBTQ topics are taught or discussed. So I had personally received this memo when somebody taught that to my child. And here I am in the Pride conference 10 days later, having an activist show teachers, this is what you can use if you have an issue. And then she taught about intersectionality. And this was the first time I learned about intersectionality. And so basically, if you're a part of this center wheel, if you speak English, if you are rich, if you're a cisgender man. This is their language, because I don't say cisgender man. But if you're a citizen, if you're white, all of these types of qualities give you power, and that puts you in the center. And then as you go further out, all these things make you marginalized. So if you're trans, intersex, or non-binary, or if you're poor or homeless or large or dark skin, then you're marginalized. And so this was just basically teaching about all these different identities, and depending on what identity you have or what several identities you have, that gives you power and privilege, or it makes you marginalized and
And a victim.
and oppressed. Right. When I learned about this, it made me think of the drama triangle, because in college I majored in interpersonal communications. This was something I learned about. It was developed by Stephen Cartman in the 1960s, and this is commonly accepted and taught and used in therapy. And it's a diagram for dysfunctional and manipulative relationships. So when I learned about this intersectionality and basically, if you have this identity, then you're a victim. But if you have this identity, then you're powerful. And if you want to be if you want to help the people, you need to step aside. Like, this whole thing to me was like, wow, I totally see the trauma triangle in these things. And that was just something that, here it is. This is how I diagrammed it. So this is the drama triangle through critical race theory and intersectionality. So if you want to be a rescuer, you can be, well, let's start here. If you're a victim, the marginalized, Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ+, these are victims on the drama triangle. Persecutors are those with power and privilege or who have whiteness. And then the rescuer, if you want to be a rescuer and get out of your persecutor role, then you need to be an ally or an anti-racist. And this is basically just how intersectionality and critical race theory works.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about why it's called the drama triangle. So Stephen Cartman was into theater, and he specifically called this the drama triangle because it's not real. So these people say, I'm a victim, but are they really a victim? And are you really a persecutor? And are you really being a rescuer? Is it real? Because there are times when somebody's really a victim and we do need to step in and help. But there's also times where it's a game that we play and we manipulate each other so that we can get what we want.
And you don't find solutions when you stay in the drama triangle. You just pass blame and victimhood, right? Or you're a rescuer. If you want to find solutions, you come into the center to communicate about how to solve it.
Right. So if you want to solve it, you need to discuss. So I feel like a victim. Well, what makes you feel like a victim? I feel like you persecute me. Okay, what did I do to persecute you? And have these discussions and come to solutions. But the drama triangle doesn't allow you to have those discussions. They keep you in your roles and say, you have to do this. And it's a form of manipulation. And I just learning about intersectionality, I was like, wow, I can really see how this is playing out in that. And so we want to make these points. We do believe that racism and discrimination exist, but we do not believe that they are systemic. And we feel that CRT and intersectionality are not the answer. Because like Laurel said, it's just perpetuating that dance around this triangle. It's not solving anything. It's actually just perpetuating problems and making them worse. So here we add to the timeline.
The Equity Council presentation at the Pride Center.
Right.
Okay.
And so at that presentation, we learned that the Equity Council was formed in March 2020. And this is in the red also because most parents did not know that this had ever happened. So at this point, after watching this Pride conference, I came home and I received a text from a friend. And basically it said this. This is what Ms. Covington explained later, but it said, Call Me Max was an isolated incident in one third grade classroom. A Horizon student brought the book in and asked if the teacher would read the book to the class. So this was pretty surprising to me because for the past almost 2 weeks, I had been told this book was part of the program. It was wonderful and developmentally appropriate. And this
Part
was
of our equity work and
right. And so at this point, the story totally flips. And all of a sudden, oh, Call Me Max had nothing to do with our equity program. And that was surprising. So we add that to the timeline. At this point, I requested to join the Equity Council. I sent an email to Kara Cerise and said I would like to become a member. She replied and said, just told me a little bit about it and said I could come to the next meeting. And she sent me the core beliefs and the mission and the vision. And so this is also where I saw about the intersectional approach, which I didn't know much about that, and that they believed in centering the marginalized. And also, having watched the Pride conference, I was like, okay, I want to learn more about these memos that Vanessa Job mentioned, that they had corrected a harmful memo, and they came out with a new memo that was more reflective of the school district values. So I emailed Darren Dean and asked if I could see these memos. And I told him I had already seen the third memo. I'd like to see the other ones referenced. He replied and sent me this short explanation. And here's the first memo, which was released August 25th, 2020. It basically just cites Utah codes and
it talks about how they were reminding teachers how to be aware that their classrooms do not have the freedom of speech, that they need to be controlled in their speech. It's not a place for political talking or
promoting your political opinions.
Right.
Like teachers do not have the same freedom of speech in the classroom that they may have in their personal lives. When they're teachers, they need to set their political beliefs aside and not be teaching that to students.
right. So it reminds them like what that means and
Cites several Utah codes. And then it gives a few examples. Like that includes MAGA, Biden 2020, defund Planned Parenthood, My Body, My Choice, etc. And talks about social media. So here's a list of the laws that they cited. We wrote that out. Then we find out about the second memo released 2 days later on August 27th, 2020, and we found out that this memo was since rescinded within 2 hours after it was released. This was an addendum to that first memo, and it basically just clarified other examples of political speech. And it said, other examples of political speech not allowed would be signs, posters, displays of Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, rainbow flags, Confederate flags, border wall, etc. So here we find out, we put it on the timeline, okay, there's these memos that were released to our school district on August 25th and 27th, 2020. And we find out they were rescinded with, well, the second one. After the second one was released, both were rescinded within 2 hours. And then we get this third memo, which was released approximately 3 months later on November 23rd, 2020. And here's just the memo. And then we have underlined the parts that we just wanted to point out. So they said they recognized the addendum harmed their community and was not in accordance with Murray City School District values. They affirmed that Black lives do matter, and they said they need to condemn racism and sexism and discrimination by fully embracing their responsibility for inclusion, belonging, and justice, particularly for people of color, indigenous, people with disabilities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, immigrants, refugees, people from low income, members of minority religious groups, and other people from marginalized populations. And they said they encourage educators to center equity in their teachings, in their curriculum, conversations, dialogue, and displays, and they want to emphasize the dismantling of individual and systemic barriers to student achievement, and that they are committed to prioritizing equity in Murray City School District. We later found that the Equity Council leadership team wrote this memo. Here, these are quotes from emails that we later received. Here, we put in a few emails just showing Darren Dean sent this to Jennifer Covington saying the Equity Council has landed on what they want to say for the memo. So this was an email from Kara Cerise to Jackie Thompson. She redacted it, but we were able to figure that out. And it's not a name that should be redacted because it wasn't a parent, it's an educator. And she says, below is the memo we are trying to get approved. The Equity Council leadership team wrote it. And then here they're discussing that they wanted it to say Black Lives Matter with capitalization. So from the first to the third memo, it was a complete reversal. Like the first two memos were basically saying, let's follow the laws. We don't do political speech. And if you do political speech, we have the right to discipline you or to take out signs. And then the third memo was like complete reversal. Like we're going to talk about all our personal beliefs at school and we're going to hang up these banners and these signs with political speech. And it's allowed because that's equity and that's centering the marginalized. So here we add to the timeline that we found out about this memo on November 23rd. And the thing that we want to point out is this memo directly affected and impacted our students' classrooms and curriculum, and parents had no idea, and parents had absolutely no say. So this was a huge, huge shift in our school district that parents didn't know about until we started diving into what was really going on.